The Idries Shah Foundation podcast. Practical psychology for today. Featuring the works of Idries Shah, narrated by David Ault. Welcome to the Idries Shah Foundation podcast. On this edition of the podcast, we will hear selections from A Veiled Gazelle by Idries Shah. A Gnat's Weight. A Sufi once annoyed the scholars of a certain country so much that they vied with one another in trying to discredit him. One scholar spoke slightingly of his ancestry, another of the quality of his writings, a third of the frequency of his utterances, a fourth of his silences, a fifth of his associates. In short, you will see that they treated him in the manner traditional in such circles. In spite of this campaign, students continued to listen to the Sufi. Their questions caused their teachers continued concern. So the scholars changed their tactics. Some of them went to the king of their country. They said, "Sire, such and such a Sufi is corrupting the minds of your Majesty's subjects. We urge you to do something about him before your own position is threatened." The king was perplexed. "Surely," he said, "you wise men can encompass his downfall, for you are, as I have frequently seen, adept at such activities." "We have tried, your Majesty," they said, "but he seems to care nothing for his name, and the consequence is that people are denying the real value of repute itself." "Do you suggest that I kill this man and make him a martyr?" asked the king. "No, indeed, that would be the last thing that we should do," said the scholars. "Since scholars are the advisers of kings in this country," said the king, who was aware that he should keep on the right side of these venerable beasts for his own safety, "advise me, and I will at once put any suitable stratagem into action." "What must be done is to demonstrate the foolishness of the man, so that people will not want to copy him," said the most cunning of the scholars. "How can I do that?" said the king. "Challenge him with an impossible task," said the scholar. He provided a suggestion to verify the Sufi claim to transcend ordinary limitations. And so it was that the Sufi, passing the palace one day, heard a herald announce, "His Majesty has been pleased to declare that he is prepared to adopt the ways of the Sufi, providing that any Sufi can endure physical hardships that no scholar would accept." The Sufi presented himself to the king, who said, "Sufi, a gnat's weight of demonstration is worth an elephant load of reputation. Will you take my test?" "I will," said the Sufi. "It is midwinter," said the king, "and the nights in the open are unbearably freezing. I propose to leave you, without any clothes or covering, on the roof of the citadel for a whole night. If you are alive in the morning, and not even frostbitten, I will accept that you have abilities which scholars lack." The Sufi accepted the challenge without hesitation. In the morning, an immense crowd had collected to see whether the Sufi had survived. As dawn broke, they saw that he was not only alive, but covered with sweat, rolling a huge boulder, which he had dislodged from the battlements, from one end of the flat roof to another. As the Sufi was brought down by the guards, the people cheered him to the echo. "I have created a hero, and you have made me look a fool, you marvelous scholars," screamed the king to his advisers. "If I had left him alone, there would have been at least a possibility that his ways would not have undermined my throne. Now it looks as if I will have to carry out a sustained campaign to show the people that I am, after all, intelligent or worthwhile, or something." And he sat there listening to the cheers of the crowd, biting his nails. The Sufi appeared and said, "Your Majesty, come with me to the battlements." The king dolefully followed the Sufi to where the populace could see and hear them. The Sufi said, "Good people, look upon your wonderful and intelligent king. In order to illustrate to the whole world that scholars who were intriguing for position are limited to literalism, he put me to a test which was really a test of them. I was asked to survive a winter's night on the citadel to prove my Sufihood. But since scholars are capable only of mental gymnastics, the only answer all would understand was by means of gymnastics." When they were alone again, the king said to the Sufi, "Why should you protect me when I was trying to disgrace you?" "Because you, your majesty," said the Sufi, "were not really trying to do anything at all, including disgracing me. You were being manipulated by your advisers. If I had caused you to be disgraced, you would not have been a king any more. Now a king who has learnt a lesson is surely more useful than a beggar who was once a king." "But you told a lie when you said that I was trying to expose the scholars," said the king. "I was telling the truth, but I was telling it ahead of the time when it was to take place," said the Sufi. "Because from now on, there can be no doubt, your majesty will indeed try to preserve our society against such people. And one method which you will undoubtedly employ is that of a gnat's weight of demonstration is worth an elephant load of reputation." Grapes. Do you know the story of Mullah Nazradine and the grapes? Someone once told him, "Never eat food which is sent you as a gift if you don't know the giver." "But then it would be wasted," said Nazradine. "Not at all, Mullah. You try it on the cat first." "Then what?" "If the cat dies or even refuses to eat it, you know that the food was poisoned." The mullah was very much impressed by the logic and great practicality of this new knowledge. One day he found a basket of grapes left by someone on his doorstep. He called his friend Wali to watch the experiment. The cat sniffed the grapes and then walked away. "We can eat them," said the mullah. "But the cat wouldn't," said Wali. "I know, you fool, but what cat would eat grapes?" The Book of the Secrets of the Ancients. Sikandar of Balkh was the owner of huge tracts of land and master of 100 castles. He had herds of caracal sheep and forests of walnuts, as well as the possession of a book of the secrets of the ancients, which had been given him by his father. "My child," said his father, "this is the most precious thing which you have. It will enable you to do things which in these times no ordinary man can do." Sikandar Khan had remarried in his middle years a beautiful, inquisitive, and self-willed woman named Gulbudan, or rose-bodied, Begum. As the years passed, Sikandar started to age. He thought to himself, "If I could find some formula from the Book of the Secrets of the Ancients which would enable me to become young again, this would undoubtedly be a suitable usage and a great advantage to me." He read carefully through the book, and found that there were many things in it, including a means of rejuvenating oneself. The writing was so difficult, and the symbols and words used were so old, that he had to go on frequent journeys to what few ancient sages remained, in order to complete his understanding of the whole process. Sikandar erected a small pavilion in one of his gardens for the working of the magical process, and spent many days there in repeating formulae, in all manner of exercises prescribed by the book, and mixing the ingredients for the magical drink, which was to give him new youth. All this time his wife Gulbudan was becoming more and more curious about what he was doing. According to the ancient science's laws, however, Sikandar could not tell her the purpose of his actions on pain of failure. He kept the pavilion securely locked, and allowed nobody to go near it. Sikandar followed the instruction of the book to the letter. He imported all sorts of rare and interesting playthings and luxuries for Gulbadan, so that her curiosity might be diverted, and in the hope that she would become less anxious about his activities. In order to maintain his own tranquility, as the book suggested, he engaged himself upon his business and tribal affairs most thoroughly, in addition to attending to the needs of the ancient wisdom. When the time came that he had completed the processes all but one, Sikandar followed the book's command to go on a pilgrimage to a very distant place, in order to hear what was to be said to him by whatever adept happened to be in residence there. Sikandar made Gulbadan promise not to approach, nor let anyone enter, the pavilion of secrets. When he arrived at the shrine, he said to the sage who was presiding over it, "Master, I am so-and-so, and my affair is such and such, and my problem is that I cannot carry out the last part of the process, for the book of the ancient wisdom tells me to do something which is against the behavior of dervishes, and which is not consistent with chivalry, and which is forbidden by the holy law." The sage said, "My child, the wisdom of the ancients is in arranging and not in commanding. The passage in your book does not recommend you to do anything. It tells you to come on this pilgrimage, and it tells you that a certain ingredient will be needed. It does not say that you have to obtain the ingredient, any more than it tells you to pray at this shrine. The prayer is your invention, and the procuring is your own assumption. Each process must go step by step. I advise you to return to your home now that you have fulfilled the recommendation of the book." These words confused Sikandar. If an ingredient was needed, who was to obtain it other than himself? If he was to visit a shrine, what was he to do other than pray there? But he still retained his determination and his respect, so he kissed the hand of the sage and made his difficult way homewards. Meanwhile, Gulbadan had told her maid about the locked pavilion. She had not said what she thought it was for, but thought, "I must tell someone something about this, otherwise I shall burst." The maid told a servant whom she met in the bazaar, and this woman told her son, who was a locksmith, "Some Sikandar Khan, who is on a pilgrimage, has a vast treasure or something else of priceless worth locked in a garden pavilion." The locksmith, whose name was Kufsaz, thought, "I shall go and see what I can find out about this matter. With my skills I can open and afterwards shut the door so that nobody will know what I have done. Therefore there will be no damage. This does not mean theft, it means information." So he went to the pavilion at the dead of night. As soon as he touched the lock of the door, however, something seized him and he fell to the ground, writhing and howling in agony. When the lady of the house walked into the garden the following morning, she found the dead body of the locksmith stretched before the pavilion's door. The matter was reported to the superintendent of police, who decided that the man had died naturally during an attempted burglary. Now a few days later, Sikandar Khan arrived home. He went straight to the pavilion before entering the house, took the substances which were the results of his efforts, and set fire to them. He said to himself, "The wisdom of the ancients is indeed profound. It teaches how man may attain certain desired ends, but it also shows how impossible it is for him to reach them, because he is not able to do the things which are stipulated." Then he went to see his wife, and after he had given her the presents which he had brought, and seen his children, and ordered bonfires, sword dancing, and feasting in thanksgiving for his safe return, he sat alone and at ease with her. Sikandar Khan told his wife, "Since I have abandoned my foolish project in the pavilion, I may now assuage the pain of your curiosity. I was trying to produce, from the book of wisdom of the ancients, something to become young again, The final ingredient was something which I could not bring myself to add. I carried out the process as far as I could, in the hope that this ingredient had some alternative inner meaning. I hoped that during my pilgrimage to the great shrine the sage there would help me. But he only said, "You do not have to procure the ingredient." So I have returned here and destroyed the whole working of the process. Gulbadan said, "You say that you want to relieve my curiosity, yet you have now produced a greater mystery than before. Whatever can this impossible ingredient be?" "The ingredient," said Sikandar Khan, "is that during the last stages of the experiment, a locksmith should be sacrificed." The Nuristani's boots. 12 Nuristanis came down from the high mountain passes to sell their butter in Kabul. When they got their money, they saw a shop selling pairs of leather boots, of a beautiful kind which they had never seen before. Each Nuristani bought a pair. When they had got them on, they realized that nobody could see his own boots properly, because he was wearing them. Wanting to taste the joys of looking at the new boots, they sat down in a circle with their legs stretched out, so that everyone could look at all the boots. After several hours, people began to get curious at the sight of a dozen Nuristanis sitting with their legs looking like the spokes of a wheel. They did not even look happy. Someone went up to them and said, "Why don't you ever get up? Is this how things are done in Nuristan?" "No," said the Nuristanis. "This is how things are done in Kabul when you get new boots." Then they explained that, admiring the boots and realizing that they were all the same, each man had forgotten whose boots were on whose legs, so they couldn't stand up. "That's easy enough," said the Kabuli. He brought a stick and gave each of the peasants a clout with it, causing them to scramble to their feet. This is the origin of the Nuristani custom of beating anything of uncertain ownership to see whether it will run to its master. The Magic Mountain. In Maimana lived Abdul Wahab, the son of a villager and a man who decided that he should follow the precept of the wise, where they have said, "Service is superior to advice, but action is better than anything." Abdul Wahab heard the villagers saying that they would not long be able to continue paying the heavy taxes demanded by their Khan, that the great dam upon the hill, which supplied water for their valley, would one day collapse, and they badly needed a new mosque. He also noticed that the local wise man, whose name was Pishki, used to say, every time he heard any of these complaints, "If only one of you would follow my advice, all these problems would be removed from you." Abdul Wahab's decision was that he would take the advice, and that he would carry out whatever actions were recommended by the sage. So he went to Pishki and said, "May I be your sacrifice? I am a member of this community, and I await your commands if you wish to give any orders which will enable a whole village to be saved." Pishki said, "You have not much time, so be prepared to start at once. This is what you must do. You will climb the highest mountain and bring down the feather of the greatest eagle. This you must take to the Humai bird, who will give you a spear. You must cut yourself with the spear and give some of the blood to someone as a charm. Then you must take ordinary bread and model it in the form of a man and have someone eat it. After that you must journey to a place called the Holy. There you will say things that people do not like. Never mind what they are, whatever the people believe, tell them the opposite. When you have done all these things, return to the village, and you will find that your actions have affected matters in such a manner that all is well, and the problems which overshadow us have been removed." Abdul Wahab did everything just as it was detailed to him, although it took 3 years. He had one adventure after another, and even attracted numerous disciples, since his repute as the enigmatic sage and the man with a sense of purpose had such an effect upon so many people whom he met. Then he returned to the village. He said to the first villager whom he met, "I have just come from far away, and have brought down from the highest mountain the feather of the greatest eagle. This I gave to the Humai bird in exchange for a spear." The villager said, "Madman, we have no time for such as you. We are preparing a celebration, for the villainous Khan is dead." "That was my doing," shouted Abdul Wahab. "Out of my way, liar," said the villager. Then Abdul Wahab saw the local holy man. "Mullah," he said, "I have to report that we may expect, through my exertions, that the dam on the hillside will not now collapse." The mullah looked at him sadly and said, "My son, you have been absent a long time, and it seems as if your wits are absent still. While you were away, the streams filling the dam dried up. We found that the old wells near the village were full of water instead. So we do not care whether the dam collapses or not." "That was my doing," shouted Abdul Wahab. "Yes, yes," said the mullah, humouring him. Then Abdul Wahab saw the imam of the local mosque. "Imam," he shouted, "you need not now wait for a new mosque, for you will have one almost at once, since I have arranged it through my exertions." The imam said, "We do not need a second new mosque." Abdul Wahab exclaimed, "You haven't got a first new mosque yet." "But we have," said the imam, "for while you were away there was a rich man who came and handed us many bags of gold for a new mosque. It was on the day that I found a piece of bread modelled into the form of a man. I told the rich man, and he said, 'If there are such idolaters around, you should have a new mosque.'" "It was my doing," said Abdul Wahab. But nobody would believe him. Abdul Wahab went to see the sage Pishki about the matter, but when he reached the old man's house, he found that he was dead. The Boy Who Had a Dream. There was once a boy named Haidar Ali Jan, whose tutor was a wise old dervish. His father sent him every day to the house of the dervish, who knew almost everything. But all the dervish would teach Haidar was, "When you have a dream and remember it when you wake up, never tell it until someone says, 'May you live forever.'" When the dervish had been teaching him for some time, Haidar's father said, "Is the wise one instructing you in many sciences?" "No," said Haidar. "He is repeating only a single lesson about dreams." "About dreams, indeed," said his father. He stopped the boy going to any more lessons. He went to see the dervish and said, "Why have you wasted my money and my son's time teaching him only one thing, and that about dreams of all things?" The dervish said, "I teach every student what he needs in his life, preparing him for the most important experience which is to befall him." But the father was not satisfied. The explanation made no sense to him. "You are as bad as the charlatans who pretend that a single exercise, if persevered in, can be applied to all men," he said. "Only you are slightly more sophisticated." Not long after this, Haidar had a dream. The next morning he told his mother. She asked him what kind of dream it had been, but since she had not first said, "May you live forever," the boy could not tell her. She became quite angry and sent him to his father. "What do you want?" asked his father. "Last night I had a dream," said Haidar, "and when I mentioned it to my mother, she got angry and sent me to you." "What was the dream?" said the father. Because he did not say, "May you live forever," Haidar said, "I cannot tell you what my dream was." So his father became angry with him and said, "You know the tree at the crossroads where nobody ever passes? You shall go and sit in the branches of that tree as a punishment for refusing to answer a question." Haidar set off and climbed the tree. He had not been sitting there long when 2 travellers stopped in the shade to share a meal. One said to the other, "The king has sent for me to answer a conundrum. I cannot understand it, but I dare not refuse to appear at court. If only the earth would open and receive me so that I might disappear from the sight of men. If only someone could be sent from above who could answer this question so that I need not." The other traveller said, "What is this insoluble riddle?" "The riddle," said the first traveller, "is this. There are 2 pieces of wood, and the king, for some purpose of his own, wants to know which of them is made from the root of a tree and which from a bough." Haidar jumped down from his branch and said, "Take me to the king." "You may have been sent from above," said the astonished traveller, "so I shall take you with me." When they arrived at the gates of the king's capital, Haidar said to his companions, "Buy a goat, a donkey, and a camel." At the entrance to the palace, the 3 were stopped. "We can only let the first traveller in, for he alone has an invitation from the king." The first traveller entered, and he said to the king, "I cannot answer your question, sire, without my companions." The king said, "If they can satisfy the Rais-e-Tashrifat, the chief of ceremonials, let them be brought." The scholars, who had been unable to answer the king's question about the pieces of wood, feared that these newcomers might provide the solution. They said to the Rais-e-Tashrifat, "Here are some questions for the visitors. If they cannot answer, you can exclude them from the court on the pretext that they lack the necessary finesse." The Rais called Haidar and the other traveller, who came forward leading their animals. He said, "You are not big enough to know how to answer a question." Haidar said, "The camel, who is as of our party, is big enough. The camel was large enough for the Prophet." The Rais said, "You have no beard. How can you know anything?" Haidar said, "The goat has a beard if beards are needed." The Rais said, "You are not a man." Haidar said, "If a man is needed, here is one," and he pointed to his companion. The Rais said, "How can you bear the weight of the responsibility of knowledge, you puny weakling?" Haidar said, "Here is another member of our group, a donkey. An ass was fit for the responsibility of carrying Jesus." People were laughing, and the Rais did not want to appear more foolish, so, muttering, "Let the pedants look to their own worries," he led Haidar through to the audience hall. When he arrived before the throne, Haidar said, "Where is the wood?" 2 sticks were brought, and Haidar called for a bowl of water. He threw the wood in. 1 stick floated. "That is from the branch," said Haidar. The other sank. Haidar said, "And that is from the root." The king was amazed, for Haidar had divined the roots correctly. He said to Haidar, "How did you come upon such an art? It has been prophesied that the man who can tell 1 stick from another will become my prime minister and save our community from peril." Haidar said, "Glorious Majesty, I had a dream." "May you live forever," said the king. "And what was the dream?" "The dream," said Haidar, "was that I was called upon to discover which stick was from a root and which from a branch, and that I solved the problem in the manner which you have just seen." This audio is made available by the Idries Shah Foundation and is copyright 2019. All rights reserved.